Welcome to Synchronicity. My guest this week is James McCrae. James has been on the show. We mentioned it at the beginning, but before the pandemic, I was out in LA for a month or so, and he stopped by when I was up in Laurel Canyon, and it was a great time. And then everything changed. And so, I'm kind of on like what you would call like the reconnection tour. I'm linking up with people who I was hanging out with before the pandemic hit, just kind of before everything went crazy in so many ways. And it's been interesting to see kind of what's happened with people during that time span. And James has been a busy bee. Let's just put it like that. He's been a busy bee. He's been up to stuff. He's got a new book called The Art of You, the essential guidebook for reclaiming your creativity. This is a real deal book. The details of when that is out, he will mention in the episode. I believe it's out in the new year. So you can pre-order it now. It's all the places you would want to. Links to his website and all the places to get the book and see what else he's been up to in the interim is also available on his site and other places. He's also known as Words Are Vibrations on Instagram, one of the more popular kind of, I don't know what you would call this, like niche of spiritual meme accounts that have found their way onto TikTok. Some of them bother me, let's be honest. Like they're just kind of like trite platitudes that aren't really that interesting. James actually, like, I will give him credit. They are interesting. Like they're not lame. That's the best way. That's the best compliment I can give to someone who's doing stuff on Instagram is it's not lame at all. And in a world where there is just kind of a lot of derivative stuff that you find, I mean, James was probably one of the first people I saw posting this type of content in a way before it kind of blew up and became like a formula for people to, I don't know, an engagement farm. That's what it seems like people do with a lot of this stuff now. But his stuff is qualitatively different. There is kind of a resonant frequency that you can feel, kind of the authenticity behind it. And he's a very cool dude. So go and check his stuff out. I think you'll enjoy it. We speak today about a bunch of stuff, not just his book, but just kind of like, the weirdness of the world and how to find a quiet place inside. A lot of the shit that I've been mentioning. Patreon is rocking, guys. Listen, I don't have to sell it anymore. There's nothing to sell. We're getting a critical mass of people there. It's turning into a real fun community. We are doing a crypto live stream on the Patreon December 14th. So if you're interested in that, you can join before then and get access to that. It's kind of a preview of what's going on in 2024. I don't know how many of you have been paying attention to crypto, but stuff is kind of happening. There are regular cycles in crypto. It's not a surprise to people who have been doing this for a long time, but for other people who maybe thought that, oh my God, is crypto dead? Which happens about every 3-4 years. People start asking the question, is crypto dead? That's usually the time to start being like, maybe I should put some money in here and see what happens in the next couple of years. Because people think people start, writing the obituary for crypto, it's probably closer to things going up than not. So the Patreon is rocking. You can go find all the details there. Patreon.com/synchronicity. The links are in the bio. All the fun stuff is there. Christ Consciousness readings are open. I think I have a few more spots open for December. You can go check that out at syncpodcast.com/energy. And that's pretty much it. I will be opening up the second Imaginal Actualization group stuff for the new year, January, sometime in December. I got a lot of stuff going on this month, so I will release the details for that. That will be a 3 group session thing where we get together, talk about stuff. It's fun. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, that's it. That's all I got. All right. Without further ado, here is James McCrae. Well, thanks for coming on again, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
It's been a while, right? I mean, when's the last
years?
time? Yeah.
A couple of years for sure.
Yeah. Well, did we miss all of COVID? Something like that. I mean, it was like, I think because we hung out pretty much right before COVID. I know that because everyone I met in LA at the time, which you were at the time and I was at the time briefly, that was right before. Like a couple months after that, everything went wonky.
I know. I just moved to LA too, and never really got a chance to experience the city very much because it went into lockdown a few months after I got there.
Yeah. And it was pretty nuts. Like, it was a rapid shift, especially like a place like LA. I'm sure you had this experience. Like, it's very magical. It's very like airy. It's very dreamlike. And then all of a sudden you have these like very real world physical limitations of what you can do actually in that city. And I know a lot of people who are even longtime residents there, they found it to be like pretty much unacceptable. Like, you can't really live there during that time. I'm curious to hear what your experience was like.
Yeah, well, it's not every day that you get a chance to sit on the sidewalk and drink beer to go while the whole street is lined with National Guard and machine guns and tanks. So it's not exactly Hollywood, but it was certainly an experience.
That's so crazy. That's
To
what I
see the
heard.
decay of the city,
That's
the
what
late stages of Los Angeles.
I don't think people really understand that. And I didn't begin to understand it until I spoke to people who were there during that time period. Like, depending on where you were in the country, but especially in California and LA, the major cities, like, they were bringing in the National Guard. Like, it was crazy. It was like pandemonium. It's like what people think of like actual end of the world type stuff was actually taking place in Los Angeles.
Yeah. It was, it was crazy, and still probably is kind of crazy there. But no, it was no joke. It was, we left after a year in LA. We just, we just didn't feel safe, didn't feel like a good place to be. And me and my now wife, we had never even visited Austin before, and never even didn't know anyone here. And literally I just had like this intuition. Like I kind of just said it. I wasn't even serious. I was like, we should move to Austin. And she was like, maybe we should. And I was like, really? I was just kidding. And then she like, it just felt right, and we did it. And yeah, we're happy to be
What made
here
you
in Texas.
What made you think of Austin? I know a lot of people I know actually moved there as well. There was obviously like the big moves by like people like Joe Rogan and the comedy scene that's like taking place there. But like
Yeah.
what I visited a couple of friends back in the mid 2000s in Austin for South by Southwest, and it was awesome. It was like truly one of the nicest places I've been. So I understand the appeal for people who think like Texas and like, why would people want to, it's like a very unique place within Texas, and the vibe is people were so friendly. That's what I remember. It was just like a very friendly place.
Yeah, it literally popped into my head. I'd never even been here before,
Wow.
and I just said it. Like literally, it was, but I wasn't serious. I was like, "Let's move to Austin." Like I was just talking shit.
Yeah.
But then when she was like, "Maybe we should," I was like, "Oh, maybe we should." And it was just it's like the music scene here, the cultural scene here. I don't know. It just worked out. It turned out to be a very dope place to live. Like I'm from Minneapolis area, and it's like similar size, similar vibe, kind of, and yeah, it just feels better to be here.
That's cool. I think most people I know who moved there actually really enjoy it too. Like the only one I know who didn't like was Tim Dillon. It's the only person I know who actively just shit on Austin, and always in good humor. He's just like, it's just too much barbecue. I can't eat the barbecue all the time. It's like, I don't know, man. Barbecue's pretty good there actually. But yeah, dude. So, I mean, since we last spoke though, you have now released, at least creatively as projects, or about to release your second kind of big one, a book of memes and poetry. And then just to be clear, you're like, yo, I wrote a new book. Check it out. And I was like, okay, I'll scan this. I'll see what's going on. And then when I started scanning it a few days ago, I'm like, no, this is a book. Like, this is like, he wrote a book. Like, this is an actual thing that's like a really kind of like neat how-to creative guide with a lot of really cool stuff in it too. Especially I found what was really interesting is kind of like identifying your intentions across like the modalities for your creative acts. There really was like, there's probably something in there for someone who considers themselves a creative, or even if you don't, like, it was really cool, man. So like, I'm curious, you have a knack for executing ideas. It feels like, from the outsider looking in, I've known you now a few years longer, and you seem to like envision something and then be able to transmute that and present that in a way that is not only authentic, but easily accessible. I think for people who kind of pick up on that frequency, like what keeps you, like, how do you, I mean, it's in the book, obviously, some of your strategies, but like, how do you create that? How do you hold on to that vibe throughout this? Because you did this throughout the pandemic and now coming out, like you've just been
Yeah.
kind of like on it vibrationally, words of vibrations, if I will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying all of that. I just, I've been a creator and a writer and an artist all my life. And it's just like, for me, there's nothing I'd rather do. Like when I get up in the morning, I sit down with my notebook to like see what comes out, even if I have a plan or not, just kind of see what comes out, because that's what's just fun for me. It's like bringing something new into the world. And especially in the age of social media, when you can share it and get feedback like right away.
Well, you actually get those amazing, dopamine rushes that were not accessible back in the day when you're creating stuff, because you had to wait. You had to go through publishers. You had to maybe find like a local outlet or like it's different now, obviously, qualitatively. That's got to be nice.
Totally. But yeah, so and a big part of it was, because I used to work in advertising. I was like a brand strategist for like a New York agency. And even like when I lived in LA, and um I was still working for this New York agency. And it was such a fast-paced like career and job, and there was always new projects, and I was always juggling multiple clients at once. And there's a lot I liked about working in advertising, a lot I didn't like about it, but I will say that it gave me a lot of creative conditioning, or like you need to like get like finish stuff on
Yeah.
deadline and
Right.
like manage multiple projects at once, and you don't really have time to wait around for inspiration,
Right.
because you literally have clients that paid money for work products. So I was always like making presentations, creating brand strategy, working on messaging and taglines, and sometimes I'd be like naming clients and presenting different naming options, and working with the design team and working with the UX team, and just always kind of in this creative churn and burn process, which is not ultimately sustainable. And it's just not always fun to be in that zone. But it did give me that conditioning where it's like, okay, I can be creative. Like it's like working on the muscles of your
Totally.
creativity.
Totally. It's like a discipline.
So
Yeah. It's a
it's a
discipline.
discipline.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's a big part of the book, is like the creative process has there's a lot of stages, but every creative process has two main stages, which is the yin and the yang, which is the feminine and the masculine. It's the being and the doing. So you need to be like inspired and in touch with your intuition and in touch with your imagination, but you also need to get shit done
Totally.
and like finish and execute. So I think that's really the magic of creativity, is the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine, and that's how where creation comes from. Like literally, like the feminine and the
Totally.
masculine energies together, that is procreation. Um so yeah, and then what happened was, actually, for in this particular book, I was let go from my advertising job. Like I was like running the branding team, and the agency was acquired by this big like technology company, and they dissolved the whole branding department,
Jesus. Yeah.
and I was let go. And I've always had jobs. Like I've always, I have had good jobs, and I've had, a good career in like advertising and design and branding and whatnot, but I've always had worked for a company. And then when I was let go, I just did not want to do that again. So what I did was I really just tuned into what wanted to come through me. And I was like, what this is an opportunity here. This is not I lost my job. I didn't like that job. So I was scared, but I was also like, good. This is an opportunity for a new direction. And I just sat down and was meditating on what's trying to come through me. And that's when I started to sketch out the chapters, the process of the yin and the yang, and really unlocking the steps of my own creative process, whether I'm making memes or writing a book or writing poetry, like really trying to examine what goes into that creative process and kind of share the keys. And that started to come through, and I really never looked back. Like that came through in the days following me losing my job. And yeah, I knew I needed, like, I'm like, okay, well, I had nothing to fall back on. You know, I was like teaching creativity classes online, and I was working with clients one-on-one and things like that. But I knew that I needed to finish the book and to put it out there and to like really like step into my own like zone as a create like an independent creator. And that's how the book happened.
So man, I like what you said there too about kind of you had stuff like you're a resourceful guy, right? Like you've had a career, you understand kind of how things work. You also trust your ability to kind of execute, but rather than just kind of making it like holy shit, I lost my job, like now I got to make money or supplant that income that comes in. Yeah, it's important. You were still doing stuff in relation to that, but you also tapped into something deeper than that, which is like what do I feel like I should be doing now? Like what does need to come out when I sit and think about expressing what I am about or what I can offer, what I think would be of value to people. I got to do that because everything else outside of that is like, yeah, you can maintain that for an entire lifetime. Actually getting in touch with like what's deep down and you need to express is usually a much harder task for people because like, I mean, I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I'll throw countless struggles in my way that prevent me from looking at that kind of fundamental question, which is like, like what is supposed to be coming out? And I think when you're lucky enough to find those things and it's clear, like nothing kind of feels better. It's the difference between waking up and knowing like you have to go to work or do something and like feeling like purpose driven. Like I'm excited to get this out. Like the time flies. You're like, holy shit, all of a sudden I got like a 200-page book here. Like, I'm sure I know the feeling like whatever the creative project you're working on, kind of like what that feels like. But that's an important distinction too. Like there is a qualitative difference between kind of like feeling the urgency to use your creativity to fulfill like kind of a resource in your life as opposed to just letting it express itself. And that's something I was also kind of like, noticing in your book. It has a lot of that type of energy in it too. It's pretty cool, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was just, learning to trust and listen and to be honestly just to be a vessel for a voice beyond myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like trusting the whisper of the muse over the barking of my own ego. You know what I mean? Because
I
like,
do.
and I don't think I could have done that without like years of meditation and just learning to let go and trust and listen. Listen to what's because your intuition, I think, is so important. People talk about like the creative muse and this and that, and I think it's just your intuition. Um, so and the intuition is the thing is I think it speaks to all of us, but it speaks very softly. It kind of whispers. And like one thing I say in the book is that a mind that's too full of information has no room for inspiration.
Totally.
So I think it's just so important for everyone just to slow down their busy thoughts. I call it listening to the space between your thoughts. Like
Totally.
in meditation, it's like you can't really stop thinking,
No.
but it's like how can you just bring your awareness to the empty space between your thoughts and whatever that means to you, but like finding that spaciousness that is kind of always there when we cut out the distractions and just listen. So just training my mind to listen and trust what's coming through. Like I've gotten to the point now, like where if I'm writing like a poem or something, I really try to write down each line as it comes through without resisting it or questioning it. Like
Right.
even like sometimes I'll get like a line will come through and like my ego is kind of like, don't love it.
It's judging it immediately.
It's
The critic
judging
is
it
out. Yeah. Totally.
right away. So then what will happen often is like someone won't write it down because you kind of negate the thought, and you kind of cancel out the intuition. So what I've really practiced is writing it down anyway, because nope, that's what came through. I need to trust this. I can always edit it later if
Totally.
I want to. That's the role of the ego in the creative process. You can always edit it later. But I try to tell my ego, you'll get your chance to edit later. This is the time to listen and just write down what comes through. So you can kind of appease the ego and be like, yeah, you'll get your time to shine. You'll get a chance to look everything over and polish it and edit it, etc. But when it comes to like generating ideas and that's not the role of the ego. So just trusting what comes through and writing it down, and then more often than not, it ends up like fitting better than something I could have like logically like
It's funny how it works like
pieced
that, right?
together.
It's
Yeah.
it's weird how when you kind of trust that. I mean, a lot of it, kind of the stuff I've been tapping into or getting downloads about recently is really about trusting yourself, like as an individual and as a person, as like a basic level, like your baseline, because that's kind of like the prereq for doing any of the really fun stuff or like really like snapping into those kind of fluidity zones that happen. But like if there's that doubt or if there's that judgment that comes in immediately and like you says negates that, you're just not giving yourself a chance at the end of the day. And we all go, this isn't to, cast a negative light on states that maybe don't feel amazing or don't feel good. I'm very careful to kind of like make that distinction now because I think people can get caught like, well, if I'm not feeling like that, then I must be doing something wrong. And then they start judging that whole thing, not even catching on that it's like, it's just a judgment spiral. But the difference of like letting the inner critic out later in the process when you're tapping into something like intuition, like when we think of creativity, right, we think of usually like creating a piece of art, right? Whether it's a poem or writing something or music or like a visual thing. But really like listening to your intuition is a creative process. Like you are pulling things out seemingly from an area outside of your consciousness that you are usually inundated with the thoughts and the feelings that you know yourself to be. That does require kind of that space and pause and trust to allow those things to come through. Whereas if your ego it's not even just your ego. It's just if you are critiquing every single thing that comes through your mind with a judgmental tone, A, you're telling yourself something about yourself right then, which is worth looking at. And B, like you're not letting stuff be born, right? It's almost like aborting, like what you're describing is kind of that union of masculine and feminine. The same way I've described it, like your conscious mind serves the masculine, directive, logical purpose most of the time. Your subconscious is receptive, generative, and you fuse your masculine mind to feed an impression to your subconscious. That's how we kind of direct and create reality. The same way you're describing the masculine and feminine process for creation of anything, art, creativity, that has to be there for just like dealing with your intuition. If it's not, you're not letting these things grow and potentially birth into like a cool thing or like a
Yeah.
special idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like important to remember that like the conscious ego mind is also, it's not the highest form of intelligence that we have access to.
It's actually probably closer to the
You know what I mean? Like we
yeah.
think like, oh, I'm so smart. Like the brain and the logical and the mathematical equations that the mind is capable of. Yes, that's smart. Like the mind is a great calculator or a great, whatever, hard drive processor. Like it's great. Don't get me wrong. But it's not, it's a hard drive. It's the storage that we have immediate access to, but I feel like there are subtler forms of intelligence that's more like tapping into the cloud, right? Where you can download more things that you don't, the conscious mind, the hard drive of your ego awareness doesn't have access to. And I think that's what creativity is literally, and I know you know a lot about this, and I've heard you talk about this in terms of like the imagination and like making imagination real. And like when you focus on something long enough, you can really, it slowly begins to actualize in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that what I think intuition is, it's also related to energy and emotion and feeling, because I think that feeling and energy and emotion, that's where we can access subtler forms of intelligence beyond the reach of the conscious mind. So like if I'm going to write something, what I really do is I don't focus on my brain and my thoughts and what I want to say. I try to focus on my body and like just sink into my body and feel my energy and feel my emotions. And it's almost like a purge. It's like seeing what's trying to come out and like trusting that to come through. And I feel like intuition and imagination, these are literal portals to
Yeah.
other dimensions,
Totally.
right?
There now we're talking my language, buddy. I mean, like this has been my experience as well. At, like when I look at what it's like to be a human being and to have our localized consciousness, which no one can deny that. That is your experience. It's been your experience. Even if you do a shitload of psychedelics, lo and behold, here you are back again in this experience. So how is that process coming about? And the best I've deduced and experienced through my investigations is it really is like there are frames of a movie of what we call reality, and we stitch and kind of move ourselves through those frames, which in the same way, if you're watching on a movie screen, like these individual frames on a roll of film going quick enough where it looks like things are moving, that's basically what we're doing. And the mechanism that helps us move through those movies are what we would probably call like our beliefs, our subconscious, our feelings, right? Intuition there then serves as kind of a connective tissue between what is being generated and what your awareness that of that generation process is like. And it's trying to relay some information to you that like, hey, maybe, if you tried this or you're feeling like this, there could be an interaction or a relationship. Like that's why I very much enjoy this, even from like an empirical standpoint. Like you can test this stuff. Like, and I think it's hard to find people who won't at the least mention or be aware of the connection between how they're feeling and what they're experiencing out in the world. It's very rare that you're feeling amazing in flow, that things are in harmony, and it is nonstop chaos. Your life is just a shitstorm of circumstance. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen. In fact, it probably will happen, especially when becoming aware of this as an active mechanism. It's just that how you feel and what you experience, there's clearly a link, right? It's like we know when we're not feeling well, what our reality reflects back to us, how we kind of get a more localized and limited perspective of what life is. We know when we're feeling like pretty good and in joy and ecstasy and calm and in harmony. We have a pretty expansive view and a broader kind of macro understanding of how things fit together. So it's just like, I think we are literally... I do believe everything already is, right? That what we experience as linear time is just one way of working through physical consciousness. But it almost like everything has been and is created, and we move ourselves through these frames of existence with our awareness by using things like intuition. And our mind, right? Our thinking mind or conscious mind is aware of moving through it, but it might not have kind of the, I don't know, summoning power that we would like it to or think that it does. And that's like an important distinction to understand, because I think a lot of times when, even with dealing with like creativity, like you want to force yourself to do so. I need this. I should be doing it like this. This is how it's done. I got to put in the effort. I got to put in the work. And some of the best art, I think, for people who commit to an artistic practice that they've ever created, all are familiar with the feeling of like the effortless thing that just came out. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, how did I just do that? That's crazy. And it was the opposite of thinking you need to put in hard work and all of that. So, and I think, this is reality. This is what we live in. But the fun of it and the curiousness of it, I think is, it's enough to keep us going.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that the poet Charles Bukowski
Love him.
has engraved on his tombstone. In big letters on his tombstone, it just says, "Don't try."
I love that.
And it's like, oh, don't try. Like, what does that mean? And like, it sounds like that could sound apathetic, like just don't bother. But no, he's saying don't try, don't force. It's about like sinking into your nature and your own dharma and letting it flow, being in a flow rather than force. Because it's like, if you look at nature, it's like the tree doesn't try to grow branches. The cloud doesn't try to rain, right? These things happen naturally and spontaneously. That's why I think of it like a purge, like the creative purge.
Yeah.
Like you don't try to vomit. I mean, you might like a little bit, but it's coming. It's coming through you.
It's
So
an
it's kind of like letting it come through you. And it reminds me too of like in the Vedic traditions, they talk about Maya and Brahman are like the two worlds, and like Maya is the physical world, which is ultimately an illusion,
You're right.
but Brahman is like the more real world, which is the world of like spirit or energy, or it's like it's similar to when the philosopher Plato talked about Platonic ideals,
Totally.
just kind
It's
of
like an
like
archetypal, idealized realm of symbols and energy rather than the physical, concretized
totally.
world of here. Yeah.
Totally. So when you tap into your imagination or your intuition, you're traversing that world of Brahman or that world of Platonic ideals. And that's where these ideas exist, and these ideas are real. They are actually real things. But from our vantage point in the third dimension, in Maya, they're just ideas, right? But it's just a seed. It's a whisper. It's not it's real in a sense in this other dimension, but it's not quite real here yet. but when you
Exactly.
but when you have that idea, and it's like it's so faint and it's so fleeting, and it's easy to dismiss it, these ideas that come through. But when you nurture it little by little, it's like you can slowly develop that idea and make it more and more real, and you're kind of guiding it into reality,
I like
right?
that. Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the importance of kind of being gentle especially in the beginning stages of the process of kind of nurturing or trying to hear that voice, that whisper that's coming through, because it can be hard. Like it's noisy out there and up here, right? It can be objectively a noisy environment with thoughts, narratives, media, data, information. It's just there's a lot of stuff. So like trying to develop the skill of discernment really does start with like kind of just allowing also things to be like it is a gentle process. So much of what you're saying really does remind me of like what it's like having kids, right? Especially in the early days. Like you can't like you can try to fight against the naturalness of what is occurring, but at the end of the day, like you're going to have to clean some diapers. You're going to have to get familiar with some of these things, and it's like a wild experience, but like everyone naturally knows what to do there, right? It's not like people are fighting against the naturalness of that process, but you have to be gentle. You have to be loving. You have to be caring if you eventually want that baby to turn into a kid, to turn into a person who is hopefully, feels like life has meaning. And I've been saying this recently, and I say it with the caveat. I don't think life has any real inherent meaning baked into it. Like you come in and like, here's the meaning of your life. And you could argue purpose and things like that. I think we imbue it with that meaning. That's the creative act that's actually taking place. And that's the beauty of it. That's the fun of it. You could say, well, that's scary because it means like this could mean nothing. It's like, yeah, but how do you feel when you feel like your life means nothing? Does that feel authentic? Does that feel like an accurate representation of what you're doing here? You probably wouldn't be here unless you think it's all just some giant mistake. That's like, well, then what is existence? What is creativity? If you think that it is inherently never going to have meaning, is different than saying you create your own meaning in life. And
Yeah.
that in itself is a creative act.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree that we create our own meaning. I would say like if I had to say like what is the bigger meaning, I think it is to create. I think we are literally designed to create. Even when you look at how the human body is designed, like what tools do we have at our disposal? Like I said, we have these like imagination and intuition are these portals to other dimensions, and then we have the conscious mind which can take an idea and create a strategy or a plan. And then we have these bodies and these hands and these fingers and these thumbs that allow us, and these vocal cords that allow us to type things and write things and express things. And we're manifesting these thought forms into the physical world. And that's like what we are designed to do. And if you look at like, um, I think in somewhere in scripture it says that humans are created in the image of God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, well, what does that what does that mean really? It's like, what does that even mean? But like, what is God? But God is at its essence, you could just say God is the creator. It's not like a person. God is just the creator or the creation. It's just the thing itself. It's the creation of consciousness. And if we are made in that image, it means we are like little baby gods practicing the game of creation with our own little, turning our own little thought forms into reality, whatever that means. Not, you don't have to be a painter or a poet or a novelist or whatever, like podcasting, or even like your career is a form of art that you create. Like, no one, you create it. Your relationships, your friendships
Totally.
are a creation. If you're a parent, you're literally creating people, but also guiding them and molding them as they go. So we're always creating. And I think the opposite of creation is reacting. So we're either creating our own experience of reality, or we're just blindly
Totally.
reacting to everything around us. So
Totally.
when I think of creativity, and in my book, yes, it's about making art and writing and this and that, but it's just about reclaiming sovereignty over our own consciousness.
Totally. I think that's I think like the most important thing you can take away from the creative process. And I agree with what you were saying there. My conception of God, this it's the Neville Goddard thing. It's the thing that really just I believed before I heard it expressed verbally, and then when I heard it expressed verbally, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I think. I do believe that our consciousness is quite literally God. Do I mean that we are omnipotent and we can snap our fingers and it's going to rain and we're going to wipe out half of the population? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I am, when we read about that in scripture, or we read about Brahma, that is where ultimately that larger dimensional world, whether you call it your imagination, whether you call it the dream world or astral world, it's a larger dimensional world. And what happens is, just as if you bisect various aspects of dimensionality, you get another aspect of dimensionality. That's what is happening when we use that realm to think about and summon forth ideas. And it's also, the beautiful thing is it's also independent of time. You can go back and reconstruct and rework memories in the same way that you can do for future events. Ultimately, our only conscious experience is in the now. Even when we're dreaming, we're experiencing it in the now. Like, this is what is happening.
Yeah.
Even if there's crazy jump cuts, parallel worlds, weird things mixed in with our day-to-day lives, it's still experienced that way, even if it doesn't apply to the same, that there's not the same rules of physics. But I think that's like a very important thing to keep in mind, that like we are actively creating this. I do believe that when you sufficiently don't want to create this anymore, you won't be here anymore. And I mean that as clearly as can be. And it doesn't mean it's something to be like nervous by. Like, most people want to be here. That's why we come here. Also, who would choose? I really do believe that it ultimately is like a major act of love to come into a physically contained world. Like, there's death here, there's sickness here, there's mortality, there's duality there. It's a crazy place to be, unless you think you're just like a masochist who just like, or got tricked into doing something. It seems like the active mechanism would be to realize your own kind of inner divinity and connection to those larger dimensional worlds, or the worlds of ideals. That would seem like a fun or worthwhile thing to do, rather than just getting like hoodwinked into physical existence and having to deal with all the bullshit we have to deal with here. So
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, yeah, the 3D existence that we're currently experiencing, it's far from perfect, and it's fucked up in so many ways, and every day brings some kind of struggle
yeah,
for all of us.
yeah,
But that's kind of the point. I feel like, because friction and polarity and duality is exciting to experience. So yes, we could be in the bliss of eternity and it's just kind of like one long ohm.
Exactly. It's very static. You get bored
And it
after a while, right?
you get bored, or like you just, it's there's the magic of hiding. Like, I think I've heard it. I think it's probably been said by a few people. I think I heard it from Alan Watts, but it's like we are God playing hide and seek with
Totally.
ourselves.
Totally.
So it's like it's fun to forget that you're God, so to speak, or it's fun to forget that you're living in eternity, because it's like playing a game or watching a movie, and you get so lost in
Exactly.
watching the movie, and you're like, the characters feel real, and you feel like you're there, and you're caught up in the drama, and you want to get lost in it. If you're in the movie and you're just the whole time you're just like, this isn't real,
Exactly.
you're not going to
Exactly.
enjoy it. So it's like, yeah, you're supposed to get lost. It's supposed to be fucked up. It's supposed to be painful. And we're here to like experience that full spectrum of being alive. And it's like, I don't know, it's trying to have fun and enjoy it, even when there's so much pain and suffering. It's such a balancing act,
It's a,
to be grateful for life itself, even when it's
and I
difficult.
think that mindset ultimately, right? I always think of kind of like the Bodhisattva's vow whenever we're talking about this type of stuff, which is a really like beautiful and eloquent way of kind of symbolizing or expressing the notion of like really staving off your own perfect selfless state until every other sentient being has had the opportunity to do the same thing. It's like being the last one on the boat. And there's something really profoundly beautiful about that. And I think when you kind of recognize what that's trying to communicate, you can see that if everyone was working towards that, at least consciously in their lives, the uptick in how wonderful this place seemed would go up in awareness. We would see, and I think we do see that. I think it's hard to remember that, especially today, because it's so easy to get inundated. Like people do not understand how much information is coming at us these days. It's incomprehensible. Many of us were alive before the internet, before social media. Like it wasn't like this. Yes, life was filled with its own unique set of struggles and difficulties, but you weren't being blasted with
Yeah.
information like this. It is almost inescapable. And even if it's kind of like you might even sense it's not good for you as like a soul to be like kind of experiencing all of that. We are like, that is what reality is right now. But in the midst of that, being able to find the space in between your thoughts or pull back and detach and kind of touch, an inner part, that allows you to express that idealized kind of energy, love, unconditional love, whatever you want to call it. Not to get too new agey and spiritual here, but like that is kind of like what it feels like the point is. Like there is that juxtaposition for a reason. It doesn't feel like, oh, well, things are getting worse. Like things are getting better on the whole globally. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
everywhere things are great. It doesn't mean there isn't tragedy and
Yeah.
horror, but like we forget how shitty things were for people like 500 years ago. It was
Yeah.
not good for the average person.
Yeah. I was just talking about this with some friends yesterday. We were talking about the information that we have to intake every day. Like,
Yeah.
Terrence McKenna said that more stuff happens in one day today, stuff, data, novelty, than happened over the course of 1,000,000 years, 1 billion years ago.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So it's like it's been a slow and gradual acceleration of information and novelty, and it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. So now it's like, I mean, can you imagine the amount of data that's being created in these, like, just like, it's staggering when you look at like every day on YouTube, X thousands of hours of new video is being uploaded. Like every second there's another like 1,000 hours. Like it's
It's
great. Like
insane.
the accumulation of data is in information is so staggering, and we are not designed historically. Like we're designed to like eat nuts and berries and like sit in a cave, and like that's where our ancestral like conditioning is from. And now we're like processing events happening all around the world
It's wild.
in real time while all this is happening around us. And it's so not natural. But yesterday I was talking to some friends, and I made the argument that like maybe this is like part of our evolution
Totally.
to learn, like because they were like saying, "Oh, I hope it slows down.
Good luck.
I hope it. There's going to be a regression back to a more quiet and peaceful, natural, non-technological world." And it's like, I don't see that happening, to be perfectly honest. But I think that what happens is we develop superhuman capacity to deal with all of the novelty and all of the craziness.
I do agree with this.
So it's not pleasant, and it's not natural. It's not natural according to our past. But
Exactly.
it's natural in the sense that this is the environment that we currently live in. Like when humans were in the jungle, and they would migrate and they would adapt. And then
Exactly.
I think about a city. Like a city was at one point a crazy idea, but now we have cities everywhere and we have adapted. So yeah, it's like it's always changing. I think we're just developing. It's like we're navigating a new terrain. The
Exactly.
same way our ancestors migrated around, we're navigating a new information terrain, a digital terrain, the artificial intelligence terrain.
Yeah,
It's
man.
like this is uncharted territory, and it's like we are in a position of having to figure out how to be mindful, how to be, loving, how to be conscious, how to be artists in this ever-changing landscape. And that's scary, but it's also exciting.
It is, I mean, that's what I think the best things are, right? That's usually what they come with, both the sense of liberation and terrification, terrifyingness. It's just like, it's true. And I like the way you look at that kind of like as an evolving asset or like skill set or way we're going to have to be. I also share your sentiments. I hear people being like, well, if the electric grid goes down because of like a solar flare and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, guys, first of all, I believe in cryptocurrency. I wouldn't believe in cryptocurrency if I thought that was a likely possibility. That would be like a very foolish place to start putting your money if you think it's all going to be wiped out because the digital ledger isn't going to exist anymore. I don't think that, listen, that could happen. We never know exactly for sure if enough people really focus their consciousness on that, perhaps.
It can happen temporarily too. It wouldn't have to be a permanent thing.
I don't think so. In the same way, I think for the reasons that we've avoided nuclear wars between nations, because whether you want to call it deterrence, whatever, like it's not the natural human drive to overthrow paradigms with a quick, dramatic shift. It is something that is gradual relative to the time it exists in. If you look at how quickly things are progressing just comparatively in a vacuum, obviously how much more technological growth there is within a 20-year period now compared to like, pre-industrial revolution is, you can't even quantify it. Like it's insane. Every day there's some new tool that it's like blows my mind, especially with the AI stuff. It's truly, it's fascinating, but it's like these layers of consciousness are also being kind of created. I noticed this when Twitter first became popular. I've been a user, I think since like 2007, 2009, like for a while I've been on Twitter. Yeah. And so like, you've seen it evolve, from like the early days of people like being like, this is what I'm doing. Like I just had a turkey sandwich to like now, like when people think about Twitter, it's like, like race wars and genocide. It's like, what the fuck is going on?
I will say I do miss the early days
Right?
of Twitter when like only like me and like I was only talking to my 4 friends.
Right. Right.
And you remember you could text your tweet.
Yes.
To post it.
I do remember. I remember from the very, very early days. It was like
the salad days of social media.
It's crazy to see. I mean, but and now like it is like it's the Twitter sphere or the X sphere, whatever he wants to call it. It is a layer of consciousness that exists. People think about something when they think about that digitized consciousness, which is what it is. Like that's what you're doing when you write down. I noticed this years ago, like the reason these social and like digital channels are so function so differently than like our civil discourse, like when you're talking face to face with someone, is because there's not that filter. It doesn't have to come through this part of your body, through your mouth, where you have to be like, is this something I should say out loud? Like, is this something that's appropriate to say to another human being? It's erased. So you're just writing it down. Now, some people have the awareness, self-awareness to be like, okay, so I want to put this out publicly on the internet. But a lot of people, because that filter is removed, just go out there and, it becomes just the war of egos and
Yeah.
perspectives and Reddit bros and like all these things. And it's wild to watch, but like, it is just another layer of our reality now that exists. Like when you're going on social media, it feels like you're kind of going to a different place. If you pay attention, it feels like, all right, I'm going here now. Like this is the vibe. It's a different thing.
Yeah. I'm really curious about, obviously, Elon Musk owns X. He also happens to have created this thing called Neuralink.
Yeah, I know, right? Jesus.
Which is it's like a brain implant that it's like it's a brain interface technology of some sort. So really, I think that the integration of Neuralink and X is going to be really wild. It's almost like it really is a layer of consciousness.
Yeah.
Like a tangible layer of human consciousness, which is like so scary. But it's like I think you want to know what's going on out there, because like people back in the day, like people could have had batshit crazy or dangerous ideologies or just like whatever you kind of want to, but they could hide it. A lot of it was covered up. So I think it's good to know what's really going on in the human consciousness. Like it's ugly. Like, I mean, God, Twitter's a ugly place. It's like, I check it all the time. It's like watching a car wreck. It's just like the toxicity and the people just flinging trauma and political opinions. It's insane. But it's like I want to have that X-ray vision into human consciousness to know what's really going on out there, because I feel like you need to. It's like exposing it and bringing it to light.
Yeah, it's like shadow work, right? Yeah.
And then because I think you can only heal things once you bring it to light. So it's like, I think I hope that it's not going away, but we're in a transitionary phase where it's like, when you see the shadow and you can see like that, then you can clear it, you can purge it, you can kind of exercise it from the system. But it's weird to like have access. I always think of like social media, like I'm more on Instagram, but I often think like when someone follows you on Instagram or someone follows you on X, they are giving you access to their consciousness.
Totally.
Which is like
it's wild. It's wild.
A privilege too. It's like, and why would you use that access to people's consciousness to fling your trauma around?
I mean, I think it is unconsciously driven. I have to believe more often than not. Obviously, the cynic among us could say that, listen, it's just an effective way to garner attention. It's an effective way to harvest attention and engagement farm. And I think there is a natural kind of, desire to get that attention for some people at all costs. And there's no kind of like line for them. And I agree. Like if all things are equal and you can just as equally spread a message that is going to be uplifting or help someone, or at least provide a perspective if they're going through a difficult time, to me seems more valuable to focus on than like mudslinging and like ad hominem attacks. But listen, the truth is when I get really angry, even if it's like for people who I'm in close relationship with, I don't act like the best version of myself. I just think, I agree. Like it does surprise me how willing people are to kind of let that stuff come out on the internet. It does just blow my mind. I mean, I've been in internet fights with people. If you've been on the internet for any period of time, you've probably gotten in an internet. I mean, I just remember like arguing with people on Facebook like 8 years ago. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? Like, why? And I remember one day it was very clear. It was on Twitter. There was this guy who was a friend of a friend. He followed me. I followed him. I don't know why. It was just something you did back then. And I hated every single one of his political opinions. I hated them. I couldn't disagree with more. And I would always argue. And then one day I'm like, oh shit, I'm this guy. I'm this guy's this guy. Like I
Oh,
didn't
I'm this
I
guy's
was
this
like
guy. I
I
love that.
didn't see this shit. And I was like, I gotta end this relationship. And I unfollowed him, and I don't know what's happened to him. I think he actually kind of like blew up as a bit of a political pundit. So a lot of people did agree with his ideas, but like, it was just like, I was like, it became so clear to me that like, this was not an effective use of my time online. Like online could be a
Yeah.
very cool place. That digital layer of information and art and creativity can be amazing. Like I find some incredible stuff on there. It's why I keep going back. But it can also just be exactly what we described, just like a weird replay of traumatic experiences between people who haven't quite caught on that that's what they're doing. And, you know, the emotions get really caught up in that space too. And it's crazy.
Controversy sells.
Yeah,
It's like if you look at, even if some of my more popular posts are usually ones that are at least somewhat divisive, and at least a little bit is divisive as I can get. I try not to
yeah,
be,
you're not
right?
on the divisive scale. It's like, what were you like? I support Hamas. When was that post? Like, I didn't read that one. Like, what?
Definitely not. But like there's a lot of subtleties out there, but when I share something that is at least, it's not controversial, but people might disagree and they might have an opinion about it, that always, because when you look at the algorithm, it's triggered more by engagement
Exactly.
than just likes, right? So if people are arguing in the comment section, guess
Exactly.
what? The algorithm loves that.
It's attention. It doesn't discriminate between positive and negative. It's just what does more. What are more people interacting with and viewing? And that's a big discussion for censorship and like all. It gets into like weird territory when you get into that stuff, because like people probably should have the right to argue with each other on the internet, even if
Oh,
it's
you
not
know what
productive.
they for sure, but I think there should be like just better social media manners and etiquette. Like we've
Totally.
completely lost track of that. But I do love the idea of, speaking of the algorithm, I love the idea of the universe being an algorithm. Because like, how does the algorithm work? It gives you more of what it you have told it you want.
What you pay attention to, it will literally give you more of that to a annoying level. Let's be
Right.
clear. Like, you can be really imprecise on what you're asking it to, what you're paying attention to, and rest assured it will faithfully deliver that unto you.
Sure. Because there could be stuff that you don't even consciously follow or like in your feed, like, and the Instagram discovery page is great for this. You click on the search bar and it's like, that's the discovery page, or the explore page, maybe it's called, and that is where it shows you all this stuff that you don't follow, but it's going to know you, that you want and like. So if you're like secretly like checking out this or that, or it's going to just show you more and more of that. It's like feeding your unconscious
Right?
desires.
Right?
And but as soon as you can change your behavior, and that will change very quickly. if you just start if you just start watching a bunch of puppy videos, and you can test this, just like search for
Totally.
puppy videos, watch puppy videos for like a day, and the explore feed will already adapt and start giving you puppy videos, because it's like, this is what you're giving your attention to, this is what your awareness is telling you you're interested in, and it will feed you that. So I feel like that is a metaphor for the universe, where it's
Mm,
like, whatever you fixate on, it's gonna find more ways to give you that. And if you're just always looking for things to complain about, it's going to give you more
exactly.
things to complain about. If you find things to be grateful about, it's going to give you more things to
Exactly.
feel grateful about. And it's a feedback loop more than we even know or we recognize.
No, it's a really, really, really good point. I actually love that analogy, because it is kind of an algorithm, right? It is. And sometimes we don't notice the videos we're watching. Like TikTok kind of naturally does that. It will naturally pull out like, oh, you spent half a microsecond more on this video. We're going to start showing you like 10 more videos like that and see if you're interested in them for real. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm like, why are there so many like confession videos and interrogation videos on my feed? It's like, I must have paid a little bit more of attention to one or two of them and now it thinks this is all I want. It's like, Jesus, calm down. Like, I like them. I don't like them that much. But no, it is. It is what you pay attention to and what you focus on. This is like a classic manifestation thing too, because people are like, well, I want more money, or I want a better relationship, or, I want a better career. And they're focusing on that and they're saying, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. And they're like, why am I not getting it? It's like, well, because you're focusing on the not having it, right? That's what you're actually communicating. You're not communicating that you have this thing already. Which is why it sounds incorrect, but when you can actually be grateful for things that maybe haven't quite shown up yet, or maybe they don't seem like your external experience matches up completely with what you believe is possible or believe is coming, just play around with those concepts and see what actually is generating your experience. Because after a while, the mirror world gets so convincing, you think that it is telling you how to feel when in fact it's just the other way around. And when you get so far removed from that process, that's when things can get pretty wonky. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a tweet the other day. It was something like, the cheat code for getting what you want is being grateful for what you already have.
Totally.
So like when you're praying or just meditating or putting out intentions, I've been working on, instead of saying please, like please, I want this, I just say thank you.
Thank you. It's my favorite prayer. 100%. It's my favorite prayer.
Switch from please to thank you. So it's like, yeah, you might be fixated on money, but you're fixating on the lack of it. And like, I need this, I want it, because I want is like implying the lack of.
Exactly.
But when you're like, thank you for what I have, you're honoring what you already have, and you're focusing on the abundance of that, or no matter what it is. And it's that emotion of abundance that means more than just the idea of money or the lack of what you don't have.
Of course. What you don't have is easy to be aware of if that's what you're focusing on all of the time. The trick is to be able to be flexible enough and free enough to really open your perspective on how all of this works. I mean, I think the best spiritual lessons I've learned, none of them have cost money. None of them cost any amount of like, oh, join this program, learn this technique. It's like those are all freely available. It's just recognizing that you have to try. You have to implement. There is some, if you want a physical change in your physical reality, there does need to be some action taken on some level. It doesn't mean that that's the only way to create, but if you think it's just like magically, like even to win the lottery, you got to play the lottery. It's not just like someone's going to hand you a ticket. It's like you won the lottery. It's like, that would be real. I would be very impressed with that manifester. It's like they don't have to buy the ticket to win the lottery. That's dope. Do that. You're good if you can do that. But like, there is this process of kind of like recognizing that you have to be able to allow yourself to move through states, right? If what I was suggesting before is true, that everything exists and it's just a matter of moving through these kind of frames of existence, then it's what is the vehicle that moves you? And I think you touched on this in the book actually too. It's like your emotions, your feelings are these things that are actually communicating with you what you prefer, what you don't prefer. And it's totally okay to have a preference about things. No one is suggesting that you shouldn't. Use how your feelings kind of reflect back to you what the experience or relationship or whatever it is presenting to you. And that's a pretty reliable beacon. But if you're just like constantly second guessing that or stopping it or suppressing it or pushing it away, because sometimes those feelings are not pleasant, right? Sometimes they feel like not good. And that's equally as valuable as kind of a barometer as, what does feel good. But you got to pay attention to these things. And I think more people are becoming aware of this. I mean, when I say more people, I say me too, like me. Like I've become more aware of this over the years. And if I am, I assume people who are much smarter than me can. So, it's how do you enjoy / appreciate what life is, right? Because appreciate doesn't mean pleasant all the time. It just doesn't. It's like that is literally a recipe for disaster. It's how do you have the centeredness and grace and balance to, enjoy as best to appreciate what is going on, good and bad. That's kind of where I've found myself recently thinking on, because I've done and will continue to do a lot of magical and incredible and mind bending things. And that's cool. And it's fun. But you know what's more fun is when like it's a chaotic, crazy, challenging situation and you feel like you're actually moving through it with some degree of grace. Even if you're completely flailing through the whole thing, there is a layer of awareness that like this is serving some aspect of my being. It doesn't feel random or like a punishment. Like that's,
Yeah.
I think it's a useful perspective.
Well, and just to bring it back to art as well, like I think all emotions and all ideas and everything that happens to us, every experience, positive, negative, every emotion, it's all Ram Dass called it grist for the
Grits for the
mill.
mill. Yeah.
So it's like that's for the creative process too. Like how much great art was created from pain.
A
Like some
lot.
of the best songs are breakup songs. Some of the best songs are sad songs. So
Totally.
it's like this is all just it's all just fuel. And it's like if you have sad emotions, that's just giving you more stuff to work with in your creativity. And it's like because it's like alchemy. It's transmuting lead into gold. And I think that's creativity is in a lot of ways it's transmuting pain and sadness and suffering and all of these full spectrum of emotions from the human experience, and you're using them like clay to craft something beautiful out of it, which is like such a gift that we can give ourselves in the world, is like taking our pain and our sadness and our
Totally.
suffering and our chaos and transmuting it into art, into beauty to be shared and enjoyed. It's like what better way to spend your time than doing that?
Well, it's like also, yeah, it's such a good point. It's like the use everything. Like I'm not a hunter, but if I was a hunter, I think I would be more aligned with the idea of like use every part of the animal, right? Like don't
Yeah.
just like, and that's kind of what you're doing with your emotions. Like it's a really good point. I think we forget it, but like some of my favorite songs are like super emotionally sad. They're like, I mean, like one that just popped into my head when you were saying it was like Portishead's Roads. Like it's not a happy song, but it's like one of the best fucking songs ever. It's incredible. And it's like incredibly like sad and like desperate and longing. So it's like if the same way we could appreciate a song, if we could appreciate our emotions as just being kind of like notes or melodies or chords or songs and bring that level of judgment to them, it doesn't have to be your favorite song. But you're not like, well, this person is a piece of shit because they wrote that song. It's like no one thinks that. They're just like, I don't like that song. Maybe I don't want to listen to songs like that right now. It's not my thing. There's a way to kind of like put this into language that I think makes it more accessible than like maybe ways we've kind of culturally developed strategies to deal with trauma or emotions, or even just like the labels we use to describe some of these things may actually bind them. I mean, you know this, your name, words are vibrations, right? You're one of your social media handles. Like that's a very powerful statement that is absolutely true. Like I have this other concept that I think of, like songs are spells. Like these are things that are literally like creating aspects of reality that can get lost on us because it's just a language we use to communicate. And like these things really do settle into our subconscious. It's why like a meme on Instagram can actually penetrate like deep layers of consciousness for people. It's not just about the medium of expression, right? It can be it can be used to express like deep profound thoughts, or it can be someone getting kicked in the nuts. It's not like the medium dictates what it's for, but the actual resonant frequency of what's being communicated is really what we're resonating with. So yeah, man, it's cool shit.
Yeah, bro. I love it. Yeah, words are vibrations. That name just came into my head one
Such a good
day.
name.
It just came into my head one day and I just changed it without thinking about it. And I feel like I've been like trying to live up to that
No, I
handle.
think you do a
It's
good
like
job though. It's so dope. I know, like when the concept of the thing you create is so like amazing that you're like, I just have to live up to this like amazing concept all the time. But like you know, you don't. Like the beauty of it is like, listen, you didn't say words are good vibrations. You didn't say words are this type of vibration. It is just a fact. That is what they
Yeah,
are, and that is how they shall be used. And
right.
you choose to use them in a pretty cool way.
But in a
Like,
good way. Like I used to get more I used to get I used to be a little more snarky, a little more sarcastic, a little more sardonic, a little more, in that kind of just shit posting meme place a little bit more, and people would be like, what kind of vibrations are these words? Like, I got a lot of that for a while, but I mean it in a good way, where it's like it's like a north star for my content, where it's like,
That's
oh
cool.
yeah, it's a reminder, like, oh, my words actually are vibrations.
Totally.
So like I
Totally.
need to like honor that. And yeah, just words are spells, that's why we spell them.
Totally.
So it's just like, and this is what, for me, that's what creativity is in general, is just casting better spells, because we're casting spells whether we know it or not. Everything that we do is like we're perpetuating one meme or another
Totally.
in our lives. And if we're not perpetuating memes and thoughts and words consciously, again, we're just doing it by default and reacting, and we're spreading bad memes, right? So it's like, what memes are we spreading? What memes are we cultivating and passing on? Like, everything is a meme, and it's like, we are some, in a way, a meme is like an idea, it's like a spirit, and like it's like a virus that we are carriers of and for, and different memes and ideas pass through us. So it's like,
It's true.
what memes are we allowing ourselves to pass through us? And yeah, it's just like, that's like the art of being human.
Yeah, man. And that's why I think a lot of us like the funny memes, whatever we're into. Like, there's a reason that that frequency in particular is like, that's how very quick memes spread. They're hilarious. Usually, like the most popular memes that I can think about just in like a social media context are usually like there's some element of lightness to them. Like it's not this heavy, huge fucking weigh you down thing. It's like, that's cool. Like that makes me feel good. It's funny. Like it makes me give a perspective on life that makes sense. And it's encouraging to see that too, because it doesn't just have to be that, but maybe it's just the people I follow. Who knows? Dude, it's been amazing speaking to you. Tell people about the book, where they can find it, like what's it called. I mentioned it like in detail, but
Yeah,
I didn't say the name. Tell people what's up.
it's called The Art of You, the essential guidebook for reclaiming your creativity. And it's really, whether you're an artist or a creative, or you just want to access more creativity within yourself, whatever that means, whatever form your art takes, it really unlocks the keys to the creative process, all the way from the beginning stages of intuition and setting an intention, um, all the way to cultivating your own unique style, to showing up with consistency, to launching projects, to make money in creative ways, and all the way to creativity and social impact. So it really is like the full spectrum of the creative process, from the initial inception of the idea all the way to execution and launch. And it's out in February. It's available for pre-order now, and it's full of illustrations as well. It's like, there's chapters, but also a lot of memes and illustrations and like full color
Yeah, it flows nice. Like
fun.
they're interspersed, very timely. It's kind of a nice creative way to use those together in the book. Best place. I mean, I'll put links to everything, but like Amazon, like where's the best place?
The link in my Instagram bio has all
Dope.
all the stuff.
Cool. We'll have a link to it.
Wherever you want to buy it. Yeah.
Amazing. My friend, this has been nice reconnecting. It's been a while since we spoke, but it's always a good time, man.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Thanks for having me back on. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Yeah, dude. Take it easy.
The pain goes hard tonight, the city by the bay, as movie stars and liquor stores in soft decay. The rumbling from distant shores sends me to sleep, but the facts of life can sometimes make it hard to dream.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. Go check out James on Instagram. Words Are Vibrations. There's his website, his new book. You can pre-order that now. The Art of You. He's a cool dude, as you can tell. Very chill, very nice guy. Excited to see kind of how he evolves his career online. I'm telling you, like, really was one of the pioneers for this stuff that is all over the place now on Instagram and social media, just kind of like these words and memes related to spiritual concepts. And I got to be honest, like I said, 99% of them I don't like. James is in the 1% that I actually find to be authentic. I think it also has to do with, like I was saying, he was one of the first. Like, it wasn't a thing. That's kind of what happens after a while when you establish kind of a new thing. It's exciting, it's fresh, it's cool, and then after a while, people figure out they can kind of emulate and copy that, and it becomes kind of derivative. So I recognize the people who are kind of the pioneers in that field and kind of like created something new. It tends to have a more prominent frequency, but whatever floats your boat. I'm not judging anyone for however they get their little hits of dopamine online on social media. Patreon, you know what it is. Go check it out. We're rocking there. It's fun times. Christ consciousness readings, you know what it is. We are doing those for the month of December. And then, the imagination actualization groups, the group work, we will be doing those in January. I will probably release details for those in the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. As always, links are in my bio. And you can check out the website, syncpodcast.com. That's SYNC podcast.com. That's pretty much it. We're having a good time. I will see you next week. Until then, happy imagining.